and welcome everyone to Loosely Scripted Episode 5. I am your host, Bach. Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't seen the show before, this is a podcast series talking to people who work in the esports world about their journey through it, and we don't have a script, and we don't have rules. So be prepared because our guest this week is none other than Mr. Cory Megaman Gilbert. Cory, thank you for joining me.
How you doing, Mark? It's a pleasure to be on.
All right. I expected, it seemed like you were leading that into another sentence, and then it just sort of stopped. I like that. It was way more subtle and less
unscripted, right?
Unscripted, yeah. So, Cory, we've known each other now for years. In fact, my first tournament ever as a caster was with you many, many moons ago at Philadelphia 4.
Yeah, it's been a long time, long time. We've worked a lot of things together over the years as well. So it's been a fun friendship and it's fun being colleagues as well.
Now, you've had a bit of an interesting career because obviously, things at first took off. What was it that got you started? Where did you find yourself saying, I want to talk about Counter-Strike or any video game? Was there some underlying passion that led you into casting? Because it feels like everybody that I've talked to that works in the broadcast side of things just sort of fell into it.
It's kind of funny that you say that. I've actually told this story a couple of times before. One of the things that actually got me into commentating in the first place. So I played at a reasonably high level of Counter-Strike back in the 1.6 days at the main and premier level in Cal. And a lot of those matches, obviously, when you're in premier, you're trying to push for an invite spot. So a lot of those matches, are very serious, very, very, structured. A lot of emotions get going while you're playing. And one of the things that I used to do in order to lighten the mood during a tense match was if I would die during a round and a teammate would die, I would actually do some play-by-play for the remaining players on our team, obviously through dead talk because you couldn't hear everybody like you can in Counter-Strike Global Offensive.
Mm-hmm.
If you were dead, you could only talk to your dead teammates. So I would do a play-by-play as a joke. And somebody caught wind of it when the ESEA days came out. And they actually asked me because ESEA does the clip of the week, or at least they used to do the clip of the week contest. And a guy approached me and asked me if I could commentate a clip of the week for him. So I did that. And then I was like, you know what? I think I'm pretty decent at this. I didn't really get involved in the 1.6 days because TSN was such a big thing with Vancilli and Dunn and all those guys midway. But once Counter-Strike Global Offensive came out and I, started getting into the game a little bit more, started seeing, what all was out there as far as, tournaments and, what's happening as far as the local scene and all of that. I noticed these two guys that were doing all these tournaments and everything and going all over to these different places all over the world. And that was Anders and Simler. They were really my first taste of truly professional play-by-play and color commentary when it came to Counter-Strike. Like I said, back in the day, you had Vancilli and you had Corey Dunn, you had Midway. Those guys did a fantastic job. Sir Scoots, all those guys that have been there since the very beginning. But then seeing it in a more modern format in CSGO through DreamHack and IEM.
And the NIP Gaming TV. That was the NIP Gaming days, yeah.
Yep, NIP Gaming TV before the Room on Fire stuff started. And seeing Anderson Simler, it really kind of lit a fire under me that, hey, these guys are out here doing this. I think I have a pretty good voice for it and have the chops for it. I'll give it a go. And then on the ESCA forums, I saw a post from Sasquatch Steve about looking for commentators for a local grassroots tournament in Philadelphia. And I was like, you know what, screw it. I'll give it a try. I'll throw my hat in the ring and see what happens. And he got in contact with me. I sent him a VOD of a recording of my commentating and they brought me in for the first Philadelphia. And the rest is kind of history from there. I ended up hooking up with the SCA, commentating the last season of Invite, the first 3 seasons of ESL Pro League, and then doing a couple of other off-the-cuff tournaments like the Acer Predator Masters in Germany, ESCA
I was at the Take
playoffs.
TV house, right? The one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool setup. Really, really cool setup. Laid back. It's kind of like CS Summit.
Yeah.
They haven't done one in a while, which is a little bit unfortunate because it was a really fun event to go to. Um, Despite some of the people that were there. But yeah, that's kind of how it all started. And like you said, I mean, it was a real quick, like right up the mountain, you know.
Yeah. Now, you obviously rose very quickly early on. Like, you went from doing some here and there online broadcasts, local lands, to all of a sudden you get that big opportunity at the Invite Land, casting alongside some of the biggest names in Counter Strike. Sam Semler and Anders were there. Moses was there. That was like your moment to like break out in the scene. When you got that gig and you started casting with those guys, was that a moment where you're like, "This is it. Like, I've made it. I'm gonna be the next big name, and this is my job that I'm gonna do for the foreseeable future."
I wouldn't necessarily preface it as an "I made it" moment. I would put it as a "I can hang with these guys" kind of moment, more so than a "I've made it" moment. It was definitely something that crossed my mind that, hey, this is something that I could potentially do as a profession. Um, I mean, who doesn't? And if anybody tells you otherwise, they're just lying to your face. But who doesn't want to get paid to travel around the world? First
Yeah,
off, and then second off, who doesn't want to get paid to travel around the world and talk about one of their favorite video games all the time? Like, I mean, I've been playing this game since it first came out back in beta in 1999, so I'm 20 plus years invested in Counter Strike, and I played it casually, played it on a semi professional level. I still get the itch to go back and do competitive every once in a while because I feel like, you know, hey, I might still be able to hang on like a main team in ESEA, you know, could still do some work in the server as well as behind the microphone. But you know, time constraints and things like that. Plus, I'm not getting any younger. Neither are you, Mark. Neither
yeah,
of us are
no, I'm
getting any
not.
younger, man.
Nope.
It's rough out there. But you know, that's the situation that I found myself in, and I get to go to this land. You know, I started off, you know, go RGN, back when RGN TV was a thing. What was the show that Prius put together? It was a temporary thing, but it turned into the ESCA broadcast.
Oh,
Um,
I really
I can't remember the
loosely
name of
remember
it
that.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
it didn't last for very long because they transferred that into ESCA TV and pretty much took the guys that were working on that to working on ESCA. But yeah, I mean, you consider the first big event that I did, I got to cast. I mean, Moses was essentially my commentating partner at the time.
Hmm.
And then they had, so it was myself and Moses and then Anderson Semler that got invited to the ESCA invite. It was season 17, um, down in Dallas, Texas, and got flown out there and started commentating that. And that was still when, what's his name from ESCA, the guy that everybody hated.
Oh, the owner,
Yeah.
LP Kane.
LB Kane. I don't know
Yeah,
why that slipped my mind. I think he gets a lot more flack than what he should get. Now, don't get me wrong. There have been some questionable things that he's done over his tenureship.
of course.
Um, but one of the things that people don't realize in some conversations from behind closed doors and everything was he was basically the fall guy for anybody in that organization. He was the one that said, let me take the heat on this. You don't worry about it. It's nothing to concern you. I'll take care of it. And that was the guy that LP Kane wanted to be. So there was a lot of situations that would come up where it's like, you know, hey, you might have put a toe out of line over here, but I'm going to go to bat for you, kind of thing. And that's why I give a lot of credit to LP Kane for kind of straightening me out in a couple of situations that I found myself in where I might have said something that I shouldn't have said, and he's going, "I'm going to take care of this. Don't worry about it. Just don't say those kinds of things again." Um, but yeah, that first big land that I did, you know, casted most of my matches with Moses, but I also got to cast the best of three next to Similar, and I also got to cast the best of three next to Anders. So not a lot of commentators that are out there, even to this day, can say that they've had the pleasure of being able to sit down and do a best of three with those legends.
Yeah. Now, looking at your like previous careers, pre esports life, before you got into this, is there anything that you did in other jobs or even education that would have helped you into this? Like, you know, episode 1, we sat down with Scrawny, and Scrawny was he worked in a prison. He wasn't necessarily a prison guard, so to speak. He did work in the prison, but he didn't have to worry about like restraining inmates or anything. And granted, Scrawny's build would make that a little bit difficult
I'd love to
because
see
these
it.
are hardened criminals, even if they are Canadian criminals. But was there a previous job where like you did a lot of dictation, or you just sort of fine-tuned your voice to learn how to use it properly, that sort of parlayed into a career in broadcast?
Not necessarily. Now granted, I've had a lot of jobs over the years, mostly
Yeah,
because
likewise.
I'm trying to figure out what I really want to do in life. I'm 35 years old now, and I'm still trying to figure it out. It's like the Alanis Morissette "One Hand in My Pocket" song, where
You just aged yourself so hard too.
I have no problem with that. That's a phenomenal song. I was actually listening to it the other day, which is why it's fresh in my memory. But they talk about we're all just trying to figure it out, and that's what I've been doing throughout my lifetime, is trying to figure out where is my niche, where am I supposed to be, what am I supposed to do, and it continues to draw me back to a career in esports. That's what I truly want to do with my life. Is I would love to be a permanent mainstay in an esport as a play-by-play commentator, um, and that's what I really want to do. Now, along my journey from my younger years, my first job I ever had, I was working at Blockbuster. You want to put
Yeah,
age on
that's
stuff.
also aging you, man.
You want to put age on stuff. Yeah, my first paying job that I ever had when I was 15 years old was working at a Blockbuster. But I've worked a number of different places over the years. But I would say what I can actually um, kind of tie the two things together is, and obviously with the tattoo that's on my arm, is music. And I've ever since I was 2 years old, I picked up and started playing saxophone, and that was my instrument of choice. That's what I wanted to play. My great aunt was in the Navy band, and that's where I got hand me down horns from her, and my parents put me in private lessons and everything like that. And I was actually quite skilled at saxophone and music in general. And I think that that's where a lot of nuance comes from when it comes to my commentating, my delivery, my just my inflection on certain
Yeah.
things. I think a lot of that comes from a musical background more than it comes from any kind of employment that I've had.
Do you still play?
Not as often. I probably haven't had the horn out of the case in a couple years now.
Yeah.
Uh, I have been in a number of different bands over the years. Obviously, coming up as a saxophonist, classical music isn't necessarily the port of call. It's more going to be in the jazz
Jazz
side of
or
things for
ska?
me.
You want to be a ska musician?
I was in a ska band, so I've done a little bit here and there. I've played in a Brazilian samba band. I've been in a ska band. I've been in a reggae dub band, funk, fusion, blues. I even was on an album for a hip hop artist, a buddy of mine that went to the same university that I went to, Kenton Dunson. I played some horn on a couple of hip hop tracks for him. So eclectic genre of music.
Yeah.
Not just one thing where it's like, okay, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to play blues. I'm going to sit down and rock some Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and just play blues my whole life. No, it's been a whole bunch of things, and I think that I draw a lot from a musical background that has helped me as far as kind of molding myself into the commentator that I am.
Now, if it weren't for finding commentary and like building that into a job per se, even we'll get into where you're at today versus where you were at the time. Do you think you would have pursued a career in music? Would you have been a musician or a music teacher or something along those lines, a studio musician, traveling one, whatever?
That's something that's actually crossed my mind. Now, obviously, I mean, being a commentator yourself, you know how difficult it is to make a way in this industry.
Hmm.
Um, Probably 1,000 times more difficult, if not more, to make a career in music. Obviously, singers and songwriters and stuff like that, they're the ones that are out there. I'd be like the backing tracks, maybe a studio musician kind of thing, but you're cutting a tiny little check for those
Yeah, it's
guys.
not much money.
Yeah, so it's very difficult to make a living as a musician. There's actually an old joke that goes around that says, "What do you call a musician without a girlfriend? Homeless."
Mm.
So that's and it's pretty true, part and parcel across the board. It's pretty true because there's not a lot of money to be made, and they always talk about a struggling musician. And nowadays, with EDM being as big as it is, a lot of times bars, clubs, and things like that don't want to hire live music because instead of paying $500 for a 5-piece band to come in, they can pay $300 for a DJ to spin for 3 hours that night, and they're saving themselves $200 on headway.
Yeah, that's totally true. You know, I'm like looking at the comparisons between music and casting, and I never really even thought about it before. But the truth is, it is there. You look at what we do, and it is incredibly difficult to crack through into the top. But at the same point in time, like these days, music has almost become easier because of the like online media platforms like YouTube. You can
Yeah.
publish your own music and you can generate ad revenue on that music. The hard part is getting people to watch it, but ultimately, like you have a platform to publish it, and there's more tools than ever to record it because you don't have to worry about putting it on tape or putting it on vinyl, like pressing records. You're just literally running a Focusrite Scarlett like I have right next to me, and or a similar audio interface, and you can plug a guitar and a mic in, and all of a sudden you're capable of recording anything. You don't even need a proper studio. Like I don't know if you saw that demonstration that Barnacle Nerdgasm put up on Twitter. It was from his Twitch page of
Oh,
that
about the noise
RTX audio.
canceling? Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw that.
like you don't even need legitimate studio setups. You could get studio quality audio
That was
potentially out of
wild.
that by just standing at your desk. No more audio isolation, no more noise bleed. That to me is like mind-boggling, and like the applications are endless in that regard. So now it's getting to a point where I feel like it's almost harder to crack into commentary, especially because one of the reasons that we found work early on was obviously the betting and gambling scene that supported tier 2 and tier 3 tournament organizers that no longer is a thing. Looking back at your career though, obviously you had this rise. You were on your way to the top. You know, people were saying your name pretty regularly about wanting to see you on broadcast. And then all of a sudden, that stopped. What was it, in your opinion, that caused this halt on your career as a caster?
Well, personally wise, an abrasive personality. That was probably the number one thing. I did the first, what was it, 6, maybe 7 Philadelphia lands in a row. And they're up to what, 14 or 15, maybe even 16 now. So there was a lull in my tenureship there because, I said some things that I shouldn't have said. And it actually goes back, and I can remember this. And it's funny that you bring up the gambling sites because it was when whatever that the biggest one that was out there, the skin betting site, CS:GO
CSGO
Lotto or
Lounge?
whatever, CS:GO
CSGO Lounge,
Lounge.
yeah.
Yeah. So that one was around, and Philadelphia had some matches on that. But the issue that we ran into was it was the post I Buy Power era. But we had a team that came to Philadelphia, and it was like AZK, Swag, Dazed, Mo, and somebody else. I can't remember who their fifth was, but they were in the building, and everybody that was in the chat, everybody that was tuning into Philadelphia was like, "We want to see these guys play because we haven't seen them play since the whole band thing went out. This is the first tournament that these guys had gone to." So we were showing the match, and we were forced to switch from that match to a match that was on CS:GO Lounge because of the sponsorships and everything. And I kind of popped off at the mouth on the broadcast in a way that I definitely shouldn't have, and I have since apologized for. But I was pretty upset about the fact that we're going to be cutting away from this high-powered match of these guys that everybody wants to see. This is the reason why they're tuning in. It's not because they bet anything on this match. It's because they want to see these guys play. And we switched over to another match and almost immediately dropped half of our viewership. And I had some choice words for it, which obviously was putting the toe out of line, and I shouldn't have done. And I kicked myself for forever having done that. But I was, basically F CS:GO Lounge. This is stupid that we're switching away from this match right now. And then I, apologized to the chat, and half of them left. So that was one of the reasons why that ended up happening. There was a couple of other things along the line that ended up causing issues down the road for me. One of them I distinctly remember was a Skype conversation, a confidential Skype conversation that was taken out of context and then shared amongst the commentating community. This isn't something that I've really talked about in the past too much, but this is something that actually I don't know how much it hurt or not. But we were doing the Face It Community Caster Challenge, and I was one of the people that was in there, and I felt like I was probably one of the front runners to get the opportunity to go to and commentate at Face It. Their Twitch channel hosted my channel almost every single night of the Community Caster Challenge. I had 10,
Yeah, I remember that.
15,000 viewers almost every single time, and then I wasn't one of the ones that they chose. They ended up going with somebody else.
I think they went with Topical. That was actually,
I
I'm
think you
pretty
might be
sure
right.
Topical got to go to England for that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you might be right. And I was a little upset about that. So I put in a Skype message in a group that we were in, and what I meant to say was like, how the fuck didn't I get chosen?
Mm.
Was kind of the way that I put it. But I think that it was taken was, how the fuck didn't I get chosen?
Yeah.
So obviously through text and everything like that, you can't really put the proper inflection on your words. But that statement was taken, screenshotted, and submitted around Discords and Skype, private Skypes and stuff like that, which I'm sure it ended up getting back to James and DDK about it, which has obviously besmirched any opportunity that I have at working with Face It or working with Flashpoint on any of their bigger projects. Which, it was something that was taken out of context, but I'm sure it hurt me in the long run. But again, another situation of saying something that I shouldn't have said and an abrasive personality. And those are the two, biggest things I think that have been a damper on my career.
Yeah, I think that there, to a certain extent, and I don't want to paint you as a cautionary tale, but there's that one clip that I think you know of, the Alasku video, the overpass game. It's kind of like one of those things that anytime your name gets brought up on the CSGO subreddit or on HLTV, someone digs that clip up or that video.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, well, this is why this guy doesn't get hired. And in reality, I don't think that clip is actually has anything to do with it. I think that clip just kind of doesn't paint you in the most positive light. I think
didn't
ultimately,
help though.
Yeah,
Let's be honest. It didn't help when that clip first came out. And there's a lot of stuff. Obviously, it's a mashup from an entire match, and there's a lot of stuff that was left out of that, which obviously causes it to paint me in an even more negative light than what it would have if you just watched the entire thing. Was I tilted? Yes. Was I having a bad game? Yes. Did I say things that I shouldn't have said? Absolutely. But there's also some other context in there that wasn't put in that video that would have helped my cause a little bit more. Case in point, Alasku was banned from CEVO for cheating. CEVO caught him cheating. Of all the places for you to get banned with the shittiest possible anti-cheat, CEVO was the ones that caught him. And he was banned for 2 years for cheating on CEVO. That's one thing to contextualize it. So he may or may not have actually been cheating. The second thing is he was actively talking or typing in my chat while I was playing against him, asking me how tilted I was. So I know that he was watching my stream while we were playing that game. And then the other thing, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I mentioned on there that I was one of the top 5 commentators in the world. And that was actually, bear with me on this, but that was a joke that I had taken from somebody else's video that they had posted not more than a week ago or a week before that on ESCA. And it's a controversial name, so I hope you're ready for this.
Okay.
But it was a video about being one of the top 5 Alpers in North America that Bluminator put out.
Oh my gosh.
So if you remember Bluminator and all the issues that he
Daddy's
ran
potent.
into with, Daddy is potent AF.
Potent AF.
But yeah, so he had put out a video maybe a week before that talked about how he was every bit as good as Skadoodle on the AWP. He was one of the top 5 Alpers in the world. And all of that. And that was why I said that. Oh, well, I'm one of the top 5 casters in the world. Most people that fell on deaf ears because the community at large didn't understand that reference.
Yeah. So hindsight probably shouldn't have said that, because then it just gets pulled out of context. Even if your context was fine, obviously hearing that, anyone who is a top 5 caster in the world is going to say, who is this schmuck? Why is he saying that he's better than we are at what we do?
And that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So that was, just stacking everything on top of each other at that point. And it was, that video really makes me look like an asshole. And let's be honest, there are a number of different things over the course of my playing in the game and everything like that I've said stupid stuff, and I've gotten heated and tilted in matches because I'm an extremely competitive individual and I hate losing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I play every game. The same thing happens in Valorant nowadays. Is I want to win.
Yeah, of course.
I go into every game expecting to win. Now, if I have to put my team on my back and carry them to victory, I'm going to do my damnedest to do it. But if there's somebody on my team that's screwing around and causing us to lose, or that's purposefully throwing or trolling or anything like that, then I always felt compelled to call them out on their shit. And that's gotten me in trouble with, putting the proverbial foot in the mouth time and time again. There was actually a point where Brett at ESEA actually told me, he's like, from now on, as long as you're going to be part of the ESEA or ESL broadcasting team, you're not to play pugs on CEVO anymore.
Mm.
So, and it was almost to the point where we don't want you playing Counter-Strike, or at least even streaming Counter-Strike anymore, because of, you get really heated when you play.
Yeah, but to a certain extent, I almost feel like that's a compliment in a weird way, because what they're saying is your attitude out of game is not good, or in game, excuse me, your attitude in game is not good, but you're good enough at your job that we don't want to let you go. Like, it's almost like you're so good at what you do that we're willing to take on that risk, that you're a bit of a loose cannon. Do you go back and watch, like, see that clip when people post it now? Do you go like, wow, I was kind of a douche? Like you say yourself, like, I was like kind of come off across as an asshole. Do you look at that video in a negative light, or you just kind of see it as it is, like, oh, all of it was taken out of context?
I've never actually watched the whole video.
Okay.
One of the main reasons behind that was, and I've watched bits and pieces of it. I've never watched it in its entirety because it aggravates me when I watch it. And it makes me mad at myself because of some of the stuff that I did, but it also makes me really mad at that individual for doing what they did. And taking stuff and putting it, twisting it to their own narrative, to really shine me in a bad light. It's a one-off kind of thing. But if you remember at the very beginning of that individual called my phone.
Yeah.
Like, called my personal cell phone. Like,
how did they find that phone number?
They doxed me.
Yeah.
So they doxed me, and they got my phone number and called me. And what they didn't mention on that video was they called me at 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah, you I think you actually respond saying, dude, it's like 3 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah. I answered the phone, and I was like, who is this? It's 3:00 in the morning. And they're like, how about that Overpass game? And I was just like, dude, really? Like, this is what your life is that you have to not only clip. Now, at this time, when he called me, I didn't know that he clipped me, but you have the gall and the audacity to dox somebody over a game and call them at an absurd hour.
Just to get a reaction.
Yeah. For a video that you're going to make me look like an asshole in anyway.
Yeah. When that all came to light, did it come across as like, oh no? Were you like kind of like, this is not going to look good? Like, how much of that video did you watch before you realized like this is bad?
I watched the first couple of minutes of it, and I was I was disgusted with myself, to be honest with you, because the things that I was saying. Now, the funny part about it is like I wasn't remotely toxic to anybody on my team during that entire game. I was actually really positive to my team. We ended up losing that Overpass game, but we brought it back. We ended up losing. It was like 16-13 or something like that. It was like an actual really close game, because I didn't let my toxicity, despite the fact that it was on my stream, I didn't let it overflow onto my team's comms. So they had no idea what was going on the entire time. So, albeit I'll take the heat on that one, but if you actually, if I was smart enough to go back and actually clip the entire VOD of that and show the VOD, especially with the new tools that they have on Twitch where it shows who's typing in the chat at the time, you guys would be looking at that video in a completely different light.
Now, obviously that was just a side piece to what was going on behind the scenes, or other things that maybe the community didn't know about, but that's one of the things that the community constantly points back to. They go, oh, Megaman, isn't he that guy from that Overwatch video, like blowing dank clouds and yelling about his team stream sniping, or whatever the case may be?
I still blow dank clouds, Mark.
Looking at your life today, though, do you feel like if you had continued on your journey and that never happened, you would actually be worse off. Because the reality is, like, the life of a caster and a commentator seems really alluring because you get to talk about a game and travel the world. But in doing that, you don't really get to explore a personal life because most of your life is lived on the road. And obviously, you're older and you've started to settle down now. Do you feel like you maybe wouldn't have met the woman you're with now and like your life would be drastically different, potentially for the worse?
It's really difficult to say because I met my girlfriend during the rise of all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In the first place, her and I have been together going on 6 years now, maybe more than 6 years. Don't let her know that I don't remember. But she's always supported me in the whole commentating thing. I try to, if I'm going to events, I try to get her to the events along with me. Now the difficulties is she has a 7-year-old son as well, so travel for her is a little bit more difficult, but she understands, if I get hired or get an opportunity to go for a job, that you know she supports me behind doing that, because she knows that it's something that I really am passionate about and want to do. That's one thing that I can always say that I credit to her wholeheartedly, is the fact that she supports me in almost anything that I do. So, big kudos to her, because she's willing to make that sacrifice. If I'm out on the road for an event for a week or 2 weeks or something like that, it's tough on both of us, but it's something that she has never really shied away from. Now, there's always that whole caveat behind it, where it's like, the trust and everything needs to be there. You need to make sure that you have a solid foundation in your relationship before you do stuff like that, because there are stories that get thrown around of, commentators that are out there, not naming any names, but, just doing some sleazy stuff on the side,
Mm-hmm.
albeit if it's, new city, got to find a new girl in the new city, or try and hook up with as many girls as I can in whatever city that I'm in, if it's that kind of thing, or if it's the drinking side of stuff. I mean, I've even told her, I was like, look, if you're concerned about anything with me, I promise you, I will not drink a beer. I will not,
Yeah.
it's I'm at the event, I'm at the hotel. I'm at the event, I'm at the hotel. That's all that there is that's going on when I go to these events, and that's one of the things, I did a sit down with Richard Lewis, one of his, I think it was a By the Numbers episode. And I talked to him about this as well, because he wanted to do a little bit of digging to find out why um, a lot of tournament organizers aren't interested in picking me up or optioning me for events. And the only things that he could find in his research was that either A, I was an asshole because of my attitude when I'm playing the game and everything. So maybe that translates to real life. And, that's my persona outside of the game as well. Which obviously, you knowing me for as long as you have, I was a bit of an asshole when you and I first met each other.
You had an
I was
edge.
I was cocky. I was arrogant. I thought that I was the bee's knees when it came to commentating. Let's be honest, Mark. That's the way that I was back then. But obviously, over the years, I've realized what I was becoming and how I was acting and treating people, and I've made big modifications to my life, which is one of the reasons why my relationship with my girlfriend is as strong as it is now, is because I've made sacrifices and I've made changes in my personal self to be a better person overall. Now, one of the other reasons that Richard had found was alcohol consumption at events. Now, obviously, I'm a pretty boisterous individual.
Mm-hmm.
We've hung out, we've had a couple of drinks over the years. I get loud, I get
Yeah.
rowdy. That's just the way that I am. That's how my personality is built. I actually, funny story, and I can draw a parallel here. Is I used to be a waiter and a bartender at Buffalo Wild Wings when I lived in Maryland, and I got off work one day. I had a couple of beers with my buddy when he got off work, and we were gonna hang out at his place and, throw back a couple and hang out for a while. I had 2 beers, and my manager came over and cut me off because I was being too loud. And they didn't just cut me off that night; they cut me off from drinking while I was employed at that establishment for the remainder of my tenureship there,
Mm.
over drinking 2 beers, just because my personality. I have a loud personality; I always have. But they took it as I'm a belligerent drunk. So maybe that's translated when I've gone to some of these events, any of the ESL pro leagues. I did the Pro League Season 2 LAN. The ESCA Invite Season 17 was at a hotel. The only things to do in that area were to be at the event or drink at the bar.
Which is a
Um,
parallel with most events. We talked about this before on the show, and I think Scrawny and I really dug into it. And not to like derail you here, but at the same point in time, like I've seen my own comfortability around alcohol change since getting involved in esports. Before I got into this, I had one beer at the age of 21, and I was like, wow, that was terrible. I don't want to drink. I actually didn't drink until I was 21. Never really cared for it. I guess you could say I was straight edge as a teenager. It just wasn't my thing.
get
Um,
the get the Boy Scout salute up there,
yeah,
bud.
but then when I was 26, my wife and I went to a buddy's wedding, and I was like, you know what? We're in Pennsylvania, land of Yingling. I'm gonna have a beer, and I was like, wow, this is better than I remember. And I had a few more, uh, and like I was very much in control. I don't like losing control of myself. I don't really want to drink heavy. That's not my thing. But I've watched my comfortability around alcohol change. It went from being like, I'll have a beer or two beers to now four to now five to now mixed drinks. And like, that's just the norm for these events is like, after the day wraps, what are we going to do? Let's go to the hotel bar and have a drink or two or three or five or seven or 20. And then like the after parties are just alcohol fueled.
Insane.
Like
Yeah, they're insane.
like 20, 30, $40,000 bar tabs at some of these after parties. And this is not me saying that those things shouldn't happen. There's nothing wrong with people letting loose. They're large parties. Some people don't drink that much at all. But there is definitely a very close relationship between heavy alcohol consumption and the esports community. And when you're people who travel all the time to these events, you're going to be impacted the most.
Yeah.
Looking at like your life now though, you're trying to kind of like come back into the scene a little bit. Obviously, you have more responsibility because you have your girlfriend and you're helping raise her son at times. With
Well,
that,
all the time.
yeah, well, with that responsibility on your plate, obviously the idea of you just like taking off from event and jet setting around the world isn't a thing. But you're still trying to ease back into the community, get on people's good graces. You've started now casting some Counter Strike again. You were casting for DreamHack the other day, doing some of the qualifying stages, which is awesome. Congratulations on that.
It's the first
Um,
time I've gotten to work with DreamHack, so I'm hoping that that could be a
they
stepping
are
stone.
awesome. They are
I
so much
know.
fun to work with.
I've always been following their events ever since back in the 1.5 and 1.6 days when they were, the big dog out there, and always had respect for those guys. Marcus Mod, Mark Winther, all those guys that put on a phenomenal show every single time. So, I'm not over here trying to butter the bread or anything, but that they'd be an absolute pleasure to work with if given the opportunity.
They really are great to work with. I love doing DreamHack events. I can't wait for this whole quarantine to end so I can potentially get back on the road. Was hoping to book a few more events with them this year. But on the same side, there's a new potential challenger in the ring, and that's Valorant.
Yeah.
You look at Valorant, and who are the first players that jump ship to proclaim themselves as full-time potential pro Valorant players? Besides the meme guy on Twitter noted, it was Brax and AZK and these guys whose careers were derailed by a lifetime ban in Counter-Strike. They now want to be pro in Valorant because it's really the closest thing to Counter-Strike we're probably ever going to get. And it's a chance for redemption. You
Yeah.
now are in a better place than you were when you came into the Counter-Strike scene. Are you looking at Valorant as an opportunity to continue where you left off, but continue from a better place?
Absolutely. And that's, there's a number of factors that go into this actually being a great opportune time to try and get back into the saddle. And the first one, obviously, this global tragedy that we have going on with this coronavirus, that's just an absolute catastrophe worldwide. But if you're one of those people that looks at silver linings, one silver lining that I have drawn from this is the fact that there aren't any live events going out there. So it's not a lot of the same people that are hired for the same events all the time. There's a lot. I mean, look at how flooded the scene is. We're only in the beta, we're only a couple of weeks into
Yeah.
this game even being available for people to play outside of that closed alpha testing, which I was even fortunate enough to be a part of. Shout outs to Stratocaster for throwing me along into the alpha test for that. By the way, Raze was not part of the alpha. Just want to throw that out there. We didn't have a chance to test her, so that's why she was broken as hell. But I digress. The opportunities are really really cool, and you get great, you know, chances right now because everything is being done from the comforts of people's homes. They don't have to worry about the investment in somebody. You know, hey, we're going to spend $3,000 to 4,000 to take this person out there,
Yeah.
feed them, put them in a hotel, get them to and from the event. That's a lot of money and a lot of risk for tournament organizers on somebody that they might see as a volatile risk to their event. Now, if it's an online sort of thing, especially with Philadelphia doing them, the Plays GG doing these tournaments, ESPN's getting in on the mix. All of these different opportunities are coming up as far as small online features that you can just do from the comfort of your home. They're not really investing much into this. Hell, most of them aren't investing anything except for a prize pool because
Yeah.
the scene is so small right now that's going to explode, but it's so small right now that a lot of the jobs that they're having for commentators aren't paid gigs yet. So this is a great chance to get your foot in the door with some of these organizations to be like, hey, I'm here. I'm ready to throw down. You just give me the word. I've been playing this game. I've already got probably close to 200 hours in the game,
Yeah.
you know, so I know the ins and outs. There's only 3 maps right now to worry about. I know every aspect of every single map. I know every ability that's in the game. I know every gun that's in the game. You need somebody that's going to be able to break down the fact that, you know, your Brimstone was able to alt the back of the A site on split and why it killed 2 people over there because Sage had a slow orb down. Like, I got you, you know, that kind of stuff. But it's like that's one of the reasons why it's a very opportune time for myself personally to get back into the saddle because there's a lot of opportunities. Same thing with DreamHack with doing the qualifiers for the North America side of things was they've never I've reached out to them and I've been at least told that I've been put on their list of potential commentators for their events. But a lot of times they end up bringing back people who have worked events before because they trust those people. They've worked with those people. They
Yeah.
know what they're getting with those people. Um, so to have Mark actually reach out to me and invite me to do the North American qualifier side of things was a big step. And I've always said, you know, a couple of things that are on my commentating bucket list are work a DreamHack Masters because that would be freaking insane because
Hmm.
DreamHack Masters is awesome,
Yeah.
and to work a major. Those are the two biggest things as far as the Counter Strike side, as far as accomplishments that I want to tick the boxes on if I get the opportunity. Will I ever get the opportunity? Probably not. But those are still goals that I want to work myself towards. The same thing kind of applies in Valorant. We don't have big tournaments for it yet because the game isn't fully released. But I want to lay the groundwork early on to say, hey, I'm going to be one of your premier commentators for this game. You guys should get on board with me. We can make things happen. I've been talking with some of the other big names in the game, like Rivington. He was a League of Legends commentator. He's been doing a lot of the commentating for some of these tournaments coming in. He did the developers versus the T1 or the
Hmm.
Braxis Skadoodles Pug. Golden Boy, I've been talking with him a little bit here and there. Both absolutely awesome individuals who I hope to at least someday get to work alongside. That would be phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, I only got to work alongside Golden Boy outside of being talent. I was actually more of like a wrangler. So we partnered with the Fusion to do an event in Philly with Nerd Street. So Nerd Street and the Philadelphia Fusion were co-running the homestand, and we were doing in-house engagement stuff. So we had a small production crew and Golden Boy, and we were just running around the venue trying to do activations. One of the nicest and most genuine people I have ever met. And I've met, I mean, I say this about everyone in esports. The truth is, I don't think I've really met anyone who was like, wow, that guy kind of sucks. Maybe like less than 5 people out of the people I've met. Almost everyone that I work with in the industry is awesome, and they're great to be around. But Golden Boy, hands down, like top 3, one of the nicest people I've ever
Oh yeah.
met. I think Sapphire is like right up there as well in contention when it comes to just like genuinely sweet people who I can't imagine ever doing anything negative to me in any way.
Yeah,
Um,
Heather's fantastic.
yeah,
Absolutely love Heather, and the amount that she has done not only for Counter Strike in general, being that she's partnered up with the Dignitas organization, doing a lot of good work with them. The obviously the observing side of things, her and Prius are
yeah,
and Rush are basically your premier three. Um, you know, she's really her and DJ have really brought things to the forefront. But she is genuinely just one of the absolute nicest people I have ever met. And she's also the kind of person that if you goof something up, she is not shy to tell you,
Yeah.
which
Now,
I respect that a whole lot, because if I ever say or do something that offends somebody, I want them to tell me. I don't want
yeah,
them to
you
be
don't want
like,
it to you don't
I'm
want
going
it
to
to
go
just sit
behind
there.
their, yeah, I'm going to go behind their back and tell 15 tournament organizers that this guy told me to fuck off in a SIVO pug 6 years ago. Like, that's, to me, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just, I'm not saying like man up or anything, but I'm saying, hey, if I said something to upset you or anything like that, please tell me so that I make sure that I don't do that again, or that I learn from a mistake. Heather has always been very straightforward, and I absolutely love her. She's great. Plus, she's married to Sal, who's working on Valorant,
Yeah.
and
Power couple,
the
esports
power
power couple.
couple, man.
Now,
Yeah.
looking at like the potential to come back into esports casting as a full-time career, do you think you're actually at a point in your life where you could even do that? Or would, at this point, is casting just something you want to do sort of on the side for some extra income, but you need the guarantee and the safety of a full-time job? Because as someone who's speaking from the same level of life experience with a house and kids and a wife, like I have a lot of responsibility on my plate. And
Yeah.
even though I still sometimes think, man, being a contractor would be great because I could just pick the events I wanted to do, and then I wouldn't have to worry about like waking up early or doing long meetings. And it's not to say I don't like my job. I like working for Nerd Street and I like the work that I do. But it's to say there's something about that level of freedom to just decide, like, I'm going to work next weekend and next month I'm not going to work at all. As long as I have enough money, everything's cool. I still
Yeah.
romanticize that to a certain extent, but do you feel like you could actually logistically do that, or would it be a headache and a hurdle to try and balance your life and your financial responsibilities with that kind of career?
That's a good question. One of the biggest things behind the whole push would be knowing the scene saturation before getting into it. That's to say, say DreamHack does pick me up as an option to commentate to commentate all of the DreamHacks outside of the Masters, right? So they do what, the spring, or they do the spring Masters and the fall Masters, or the summer and the winter. Those are their biggest events that they do, but they also run, DreamHack Austin, DreamHack Atlanta, or whatever the other ones
DreamHack
that they
opens,
do.
yeah.
Yeah, the open circuit, where it's what, 8 or 10 tournaments over the course of a calendar year, one a month basically is what they're running. Could I do something like that? I think that I could do something like that. Now, with as saturated as the Counter-Strike scene is, and you see, obviously these two big leagues that are competing against each other between Flashpoint and ESL Pro League, would I be able to go when they open up the studios and do an ESL Pro League where I'm on site for 4 to 6 weeks and be away from my family for that? Probably not. That would most likely chew me up inside to the point where I'd just be homesick,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd want to get back on the road and get back home, to be with my family. If it's a 3 or 4 day event where I'm gone for maybe a max of 7 days, you fly out the day before the event, you work the 5 day event, you fly back the day after, 7 days out of your schedule. That's something that I could probably make happen. The biggest thing is going to be, how are they going to do Valorant? They've started to talk about, the small tournaments, anything under, what was it, $15,000, and then anything from 15,000 to $100,000, and then anything over $100,000. Those are your three different tiers
Mm-hmm.
of tournaments that they're going to have. Now, are they going to do a league the way that they've done for League of Legends? Are they going to have like an LCS and an LEC?
Franchising and everything, yeah.
Exactly. Are they going to do it as a franchise league? If that's the case, then that's going to be studio stuff like ESL Pro League. That's not going to be something that I'm going to be able to commit to. If they do it like a DreamHack where they've got open tournaments once a month, then yeah, I could do something like that. So it's really going to come down to the actual ecosystem that comes out when Valorant really drops, to see what's out there and what's available. And it's also going to depend on what tournament organizers are willing to pay for the talent to come in, because obviously, like you said, I also, last year, I bought my first house. I
Yeah.
bought a new car. My girlfriend and I have been living together for 2 years now. Her son's 7 years old. There's a lot of financial responsibility on my back. And one thing that's actually happened here recently, which has sent me into a little bit of a panic, is I work in the automotive industry. The automotive industry is very slow right now. And I actually got furloughed for the next 6 weeks from my job with no pay. So I'm literally, it's a temporary layoff is the way
Yeah.
that they say that.
Yeah.
So I can file for unemployment benefits, but the system is so clustered with unemployment claims right now that I most likely wouldn't see any return on any unemployment filings maybe until June or July,
Yeah.
which is really scary because that's literally 2 months of no income coming in. So in the interim, I'm trying to scoop up as many commentating gigs that I possibly can, trying to get as much going as I possibly can. I had somebody reach out to me. You'll get a kick out of this. I actually had somebody reach out to me yesterday, and the message started off, "Dear Scrawny."
I
Um,
already know who it is.
do you?
Yes.
Was it like a copy pasted message? Because that's what
I
I got. I
think
got a
I
Dear
think
Scrawny from.
so.
Okay.
Yeah, they had actually reached out to me as well, and because of my schedule, I said I can't commit to this because I have a
Right.
full-time job. But I gave them two names, and you're welcome. Yours was one of them. And I said,
Hey.
these guys are very good at what they do, and they could definitely, use the work. It's you and some other like Darth Mike, who's another
Yeah.
caster you've worked with, Mike, before. The
Hmm.
idea is you guys are not necessarily full time at this, but right now you are full time at this because you don't have another source of income. I said I highly recommend these guys, so hopefully that all works out. They're reliable. I just think that you got to copy paste because he got the same one, which is why I say that. I
So
think
I
they,
imagine he probably reached out to Scrawny for this too. No, it's fine, but
yeah,
it's a paying opportunity, and it's
exactly,
in May, which means that I'm still out of work during that time. So I personally can commit to something like that. So, and if I get hired for that, and if I get my asking rate for it, then that will actually set me for the time that I'll be out of work,
yeah.
which is huge, which is absolutely huge because that supplements all the income loss that I would have over this past 2 months.
Now, what
So,
if Riot came to your door and they said, "Hey, we'd love to hire you to be a full time caster for Valorant, but you're going to have
but
to move." Would you uproot your family? Because this is a conversation my wife and I have had before. If like a job came up on the West Coast or in Europe, like what do we do? Because I have been offered gigs in Europe. I like a full time job in Europe, and I turned it down because the logistical headache of uprooting my whole family and moving to a country where I don't speak the language was terrifying. And this is not like moving to like, you know, like the Czech Republic or like moving to like a CIS region country or some like remote area in Eastern Europe where I really couldn't communicate. It was Germany. So
right.
obviously like there's a high percentage of English speaking people there, and I could probably pick up a little bit of German to get around. But I still turned it down because the idea of just uprooting my family is a little bit much, and if I'm gonna do it, going straight to Europe is a little bit scary. I'd almost rather go like to Cali or like Washington or something first and get a handle on that whole process. But would
Yeah.
you?
Well, that's the big thing because it depends on the where and the when. I think is the most important part of that equation. The where being, like you said, I mean, moving to a different part of the country is one thing. Moving to a different country altogether is a whole different ball of wax. Now, if they came to me and they said, "Hey, we want to hire you as a full time employee at Riot as a commentator for Valorant. We need you to move out to the California area." That's going to have its own issues along with it because where I currently live, the cost of living is relatively inexpensive. Moving out to the Los Angeles area is extremely expensive. Now, would they be putting me up in their own employee apartment areas? I don't know. There's a lot of extra questions that would need to be asked along with that. But to answer the main part of the question, it's something that I would have to discuss with my girlfriend. And not only that, but I'd also have to discuss with her son's father, um,
Mm,
because he is still a part of
added
his life.
variable. Yeah.
So I need to make sure that, hey, this is an opportunity that I have, but it would take your son away from you, and you might not see him again for a very long time, or maybe not ever again. Is that something that you're willing to be okay with? Um, And that's a very heavy discussion to have with somebody because it's not my child. I
Yeah.
can't weigh in on it one way or the other. All I can do is ask the question. That's his flesh and blood, you know. Albeit he spends most of his time at my house, my girlfriend and my house, but it's still his child, and that's not my decision to make. So I that would be a really heavy conversation to have. Do I think it's within the realm of possibility? I think it would be. Again, there's a big discussion now. My girlfriend's lived in a couple of different countries herself, and she's always talked about wanting to possibly move to Europe or move to Japan. Those are a couple of places. You know, she was born in, I believe she was born in Belgium, and she lived in Germany for a while. Her father was in the military.
Mm.
She lived in Japan for a while, so she's lived in a couple of different places, and it's something, you know, going to Japan is something on my bucket list. Living there would be a whole different lifestyle,
Yeah.
obviously. um, but you know, it's something that would have to be discussed. Is it out of the realm of possibility? I don't think so. I think that she would probably be on board with it, but you know, a heavy question.
Yeah, I mean, we've had that conversation a couple different times, and I think that the way it always lands is basically, is this just for the job? If it's just for work, which means it's just for money, then the answer is probably going to be no. Our whole
Right.
lives are centered where we live. My family's here, her family's an hour away. You know, I have several nieces and nephews. I have 6 of them. My kids are 2 of 8 grandchildren for my parents. And it's like a regular thing when obviously we're not in quarantine that everyone gets together. Like pretty much every Sunday we're at my parents' house and everyone is spending time together. All the cousins get together. My parents put in a pool. They want to put in a zip line. Like they're basically trying to make their house like the hangout spot so that the kids always want to be there because they want to be heavily invested in their grandchildren's lives. And that's
Yeah.
great. But it makes it very uncomfortable if someone came to me with an amazing opportunity because it'd be like, I want to take this, but I just can't. So
Yeah.
it is tough. But at the same point in time, having conversations with others who work in this industry who can take those chances, who can roll the dice and relocate, and who can travel the world constantly, there's an element to their life that they're missing, and it's the element that we both have. They
Yeah.
they can't settle down or meet someone or even have friends sometimes. Like let's be real, the job of being a caster and traveling the world is really cool. You get to go to some really cool places, but you don't like go and like hang out on the beach and like enjoy the local fare. You work. And then like if you're lucky, stuff's still open when the workday is done, or maybe you have a day before or after the event to get to actually go see stuff. But even
Yeah.
still, you're not getting like a proper vacation. It's work. You're doing your job. And as a result, when you go from event to event, living in a suitcase, constantly traveling, it's hard to like have a serious relationship or have serious relationships with friends. I think it was Moses. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he had bought a house, and it was like 5.5 weeks later, and he still hadn't even actually moved in because he was on the road.
Yeah.
He didn't have time to actually go do that stuff, and that's kind of sad in some ways. Like they get to do an awesome thing and they have a great job, but you and I both know how rewarding that personal life can be. Like I love when my kids wake me up in the morning, even though they drive me nuts, and the first thing what they want to do is hug me and snuggle me and tell me that they love me. I love when they draw me pictures. I love when they bring me stuff. I love when they troll me when I'm live on a show, which they didn't do this time, and bang on the windows and then run away on the outside of my office. Like that to me is great. Like as much as quarantine has sucked because it's just completely flipped life upside down, and it's a terrible time for people who are suffering from this illness and also people who have lost loved ones. There's some silver lining for me in that I'm home every day with my family in a way that I haven't been in a while because I've been commuting for work. So, yeah, I mean, we kind of have a good thing already. So, it's a little bit weird to think about the people who don't and to think about
Yeah.
how we would actually go about bringing that into our lives if we tried to balance the two. Because I'll be honest, I don't think I could balance both. I did like 2 weeks in LA doing Pro League. I was supposed to do the whole season. It was going to be like a month and a half. That fell apart. And then I also did 2 weeks in England and Dallas for a variation of events that I was working on. That alone was really tough. 2 weeks away. I can't imagine months or like coming home for a day in between and then going away again for 14 days. That's to me is just crazy.
Yeah. Well, it really makes you appreciate some of the people in the industry that
Yeah,
do both of them. Like take a look at Anders, you
Anders.
know,
Yeah.
young child, married, owns his own house and everything. I bet he's loving this quarantine life right now because he gets to spend so much time with his family
Well,
when
he
he's
was in
able.
L.A. Remember, he was in L.A. for
Oh,
Flashpoint.
so he's not home then.
He just left 2 days ago. I think it was over the weekend or at the end of last week. Maybe it was even the beginning of this week.
I
So
forgot
like,
about that.
and Flashpoint said, like he said, Flashpoint took great care of him. They were originally going to fly his family out there to see him because it was such a long time. Which is, hey, I've been pretty critical of Flashpoint publicly and privately, even worse probably. But I think that's a great move. And I think ultimately, like Flashpoint had the right ideas, just some things didn't hit for me that I would like to see changed.
Agreed.
But I I appreciate that as a a family man myself. The idea that like, hey, we're taking you away for a long time. Let's make do. Like one year we were, I think it was when we actually casted the event in England. That very first Premier Land, that was Mother's Day, if I'm not mistaken, Mother's Day weekend. And as like an apology for taking me away, ESCA sent my wife flowers. Like it's those little things that are like, oh, that was very nice of them because they're still paying me to do a job. It's not like they were like, come to England and it's all for the exposure. Now, like I was getting paid to go do a gig, but because they recognized that it was difficult to take me away, they tried to make good to my wife by just sending
Yeah.
her flowers and an apology for taking me away on that weekend.
I'm doing the right thing, and that little those little things like that go a really long way, um, in your relationship with your wife too, because it's like, hey, you know, I'm going to be away for a little while, and then something shows up like that, and she's like, oh, you know, at least he's going to work for a place that cares,
Yeah, a place that thinks
you
about
know,
me and sees me as a person and not just an accessory to him.
yeah, and
Well,
that's huge.
I mean, the truth is, I still salivate at the opportunity to like, oh man, if somebody said to me, we want to bring you in as a full time caster for like ESL Pro League or Flashpoint, I still think like that would be pretty cool. I used to think like, oh, I really want to cast a major and do all this other stuff. I'm like kind of okay where I'm at right now. Like I've gotten to do a lot, so I'm not complaining about my position in the industry. But I look at the people who have sacrificed to get there, and I think, you know what? I don't know if I could push that hard. I will say this quarantine has actually made it probably easier for you to get back into it. Not only because your schedule is more relaxed and because you were home more when you weren't working, but now with the switch to online again, all of
Yeah,
these opportunities that had basically been off limits are now alive again. Like when
yeah.
everything was studio based, there
Oh,
was
there
no
was
work
nothing.
online.
Yeah, there
Online work
was
died.
nothing. Yeah, and it was really hard to, especially if you're an aspiring commentator. I mean, the only things that were still around in the area was the ESCA Caster Challenge,
Yeah,
was really the only thing because Face It really doesn't do anything anymore. So the Community Caster Challenge for Face It is gone by the wayside at this point.
and open
Now,
IP casting is pretty much gone as well. With
yeah,
all of the content being controlled by the people running the events. Back in the day, you used to have like 30 or 40 streams of all these community casters casting all the off stream stuff. They don't do that anymore. Either there's the stream match or there's nothing, or it's
yeah.
partners.
And you know, obviously with you having worked at ESCA and everything, you know, I've tried reaching out to them about doing the community, the caster challenge through them, and it's, you know, not your fault by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been told no, I'm not allowed to participate in it, which kind of sucks because, you know, that was one of the things why I think Face It decided ultimately not to bring me in after doing the community challenge for them, was because, and it was, I was in such a weird like limbo state where I was too big of a name to be considered a newcomer, but I wasn't a big enough name to get hired as a mainstay for certain events.
Mm.
So I was in this weird in between where people knew who I was, but they didn't know enough about me to warrant being at the big events. So I was caught in this amalgamation of known and unknown.
Yeah.
And that I think also hurt a pretty good deal, because and take into consideration this as well. I did, if you remember, I used to do pretty much all of the online qualifiers for
For
Star
Star
Ladder.
Ladder. I knew exactly what you were going to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So here, I don't know if I've ever had this conversation with you, or if I've even said this publicly, but Star Ladder, I talked to them a number of times, basically letting them know, hey, for 4 seasons, I've done all of your North American qualifiers
Alone.
alone by
Yeah.
myself. Is there going to be an opportunity for me to actually come and live broadcast at your events? And do you know what they did? They linked me my wiki page that showed all of the events that I had done in my career. And then they linked me just Harry's wiki page, which had 30 times more events on there, and said, we're looking for somebody with this kind of experience.
That's a weird way to do it.
Which I took as a complete slap in the face. Nothing against Harry, because he's earned being everywhere that he is able to be.
Yeah.
I think he's a phenomenal caster.
Oh, he's a good kid too. I love Harry.
I think Hugo's a great guy too. I actually got to cast with Harry when he was first coming on the scene, when we were doing the E-Frag broadcasts before the World Championships that they still haven't paid out. But I love Harry. I think he's a phenomenal caster, and I think he's earned being where he's at. But to sit there and say, because of this information on a wiki page that's this big versus this big, we're not going to hire you, despite the fact that you have pretty much pro bono done our online qualifiers for us for the past 2+ years.
Mm.
And that was a huge, huge slap in the face from them, because it's like, dude, I've put in so much work for you guys. All I'm asking is for an opportunity.
Yeah. I mean,
all I'm asking is a chance.
I know how that goes. When I was supposed to do all of Pro League back in season 3, I think it was, or no, season 5.
It would have been after I was there. My last season was season 3. So.
Yeah, season 3 was right when they switched to studio, I think.
Yep.
So, and it was halfway through the season, because I remember being brought in and doing like 3 matches, and then everything went studio based, and it was Moses and Blue. Season 5, they brought me in, and when they approached me, I said, I'm totally open to this. I literally I contacted my bosses when I worked in IT, and I said, I'm going to be in California for 3 months. I'm still going to work. I'll wake up at 5 a.m. and do my job, and I'll be done at 2 p.m. And then I'll go get dressed, go to the studio for makeup, and I would do that 3 days a week. And then the other days of the week, I would just do my day job. And they were like, okay, yeah, we can work that. My wife was like not super on board, but at the same point in time, it was a pretty big paycheck because it was such a significant amount of work. So we were able to justify the time away from home for me being out there.
Right.
One of the things I said to them, though, during the negotiation phase, I said, hey, I'm doing a lot to make this come together. If you're going to fly me out there, can you guarantee me that I get to do the offline event too? Like, even if I only get to do group stages, that's cool. But if you're going to bring me out to this event, can you guarantee me that? And they said, absolutely not. I was like, okay, well, that sucks. And I think a lot of people have experienced a similar blow in that they've casted group stages for even Pro League or similar events where they've gotten to go in at the group stage level and do the studio work. And then when it comes time for the offline arena event,
they get overlooked.
They get shafted because ultimately they want to get the best talent. And I get that. I get that you want to have the best of the best, the number 1 and number 2 casters in the world, and you want to have the best pairs. But at the same point in time, it does make you feel like, A, you're not worth it, and B, they just used you.
Yeah. And in my case, the number one thought that goes through my head, especially with the Star Ladder thing that happened, was, am I just not good enough?
Yeah.
Am I just not good enough to be at your event because I don't get hired on the regular? Maybe other event organizers think that I'm just not good enough at it. So maybe I've had it wrong this whole time, and maybe I shouldn't be trying to do this. You know, and that's the harsh realization that you come to when you get into situations like this is, you know, I think I'm pretty damn good at what I do. I wouldn't have gotten to where I had gotten to if I wasn't good at what I did.
Yeah.
Um, However, back in those times, I mean, we're talking 5, 6 years ago now. Back in those times, there wasn't this oversaturation of prospective talent in the industry. And one of the things that you'll start to see, especially with Valorant coming out, is multi esport commentators. So you're
Mm-hmm.
going to really start to see guys. In case in point, obviously, one of the first ones that came over was Golden Boy, Rivington, who did League of Legends, and now he's doing Valorant stuff.
Puckett was doing it. Pansy's done it.
Puckett,
Yeah.
Moses is doing one now. So you're going to have a lot of people who are going to be, dipping their toes in both ends of the pool. And that's going to make things even more difficult for up and coming commentators, because they're going to say, hey, this guy is one of the premier Counter-Strike commentators that's out there. He's worked a handful of Valorant events, albeit small. We can bring him in for the big events because he's going to know his stuff and do his research, and he's going to come prepared, and he's going to know everything that he needs to know about all the stuff that he needs to know about.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody like in my situation, somebody like myself is going to be every bit as rehearsed, if not more so, but going to get overlooked because I don't have the professional credibility that somebody else that's coming from another scene will.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
think that
where
the way to sum it up ultimately is, you ever apply for a job and on the thing they say, this is an entry level position, requirement 5 years experience. And you go,
oh
hold
yeah,
on, this is an entry level position and you expect me to have done it for 5 years somewhere else? If that's the case, how is this an entry level position? And not only
exactly.
that, how does someone even get this job to begin with? Because if you're only willing to hire people that have 5 years of experience, eventually no one is left that has experience because you haven't been hiring them. So that's kind of like the way that it works in the counter or the esports world. Sometimes you feel like, man, they won't hire me because I don't have the experience, but I can't get the experience if they won't hire me.
And that was the conversation I had with Starladder. I was like, look, one of the reasons why I don't have a whole lot listed on there is because I haven't gotten hired for events recently. That can change starting with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
If I get Starladder on my list, then maybe some other organizers will go, hey, man, he worked that big event at Starladder, that $250,000 $250,000 tournament. That's a pretty big event, or a $500,000 event. That's a big event. Maybe he's worth bringing in for our $100,000 dream hack, or our $250,000, whatever IEM. Maybe it's worth having him in there. And then you start building that resume. The same thing happened to me when I was looking for prospective jobs as a waiter. You know, Most restaurants want to hire people that already have waiter experience or server experience. How do you get server experience? Well, you got to find a place to be a server. Well, they won't hire you because you don't have the experience. It's a shitty catch
Yeah.
22,
Yeah.
and it goes through numerous different industries.
Yep. It absolutely is terrible, but we've seen people crack through it, and a lot of that just relates to hard work and perseverance. Just putting your head down and being willing to do gigs that maybe other people aren't willing to take, working for limited money. We experienced that early on when we came in, because back then there was no money. So even the good gigs were basically paying chump change. And then the betting boom came, and even the bad gigs paid good money. And then the betting boom died off, and you watched all the terrible casters who were getting all this easy money disappear, because obviously they weren't good enough to hang with the rest of us. But again, we're back to where we were 3 or 4 years ago, when in
Yeah.
order to crack in, you basically have to find somebody to latch yourself onto early on and work really hard and hope that the right people see it and make a name for yourself. And it's very, very difficult, and I really wish anyone out there that's doing it the best. But I think at this point we can probably call it quits here, Mr. Megaman, sir.
Well, before we do, I wanted
Yes.
to
No, you
kind of
go ahead. You
piggyback.
get your closing point.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off of what you were saying there real quick, because I'm sure you remember a tweet that I put out probably about maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago that said, "I will work your event for free," basically as an
Mm-hmm.
unpaid internship, to prove to you that I'm worth paying in the future. And that actually got a lot of traction, and a lot of negative traction at that, because people thought that I was trying to undercut other people in the industry, which isn't the case. It's saying, hey, I'm willing to get my name out there, and I'm willing to get my name out there for absolutely no no accolades, no money, no nothing, just so I can say, hey, that guy did a really good job. I want him at my event.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure other people took a little bit of a offense to that, only because there's fear in people saying I'm willing to do this for less or nothing, because they realize, like,
undercutting happens.
Yeah, undercutting does happen, and there are
And
people
it
that maybe
sucks.
one day I'll publicly call them out, but there are people I have privately called out before for undercutting gigs, and there are people who've done it without even realizing it. Topical, I love you to death, but at one point in his career, he went, I don't really need the money. I'm like, I don't care if you need the money at all. Everyone else does. So when you don't bill and they don't pay you, ultimately it just means that, like, everyone else is getting screwed, because now there's this guy that does a passable job for free compared to the people who cost several hundreds of dollars a day.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, he realized, yeah, you're right, and he fixed that pretty early on in his career. But there are other people who I know for a fact, they know how much everyone's making, and they know how to get gigs by charging 40% of that, because to them it's still good money. But
in my case, I have absolutely no idea what the going rate for a tier 1 commentator is these days. So
we
I
can
wouldn't
talk
even know what
offline,
to
so
charge.
we'll make sure we get your rates under control so you don't screw yourself or screw somebody else. But
I mean, I don't want to. I want to try and be as fair to everybody else in the industry that I possibly can. If I'm trying to get back into this, I'm not trying to undercut anybody. I'm not trying to, charge an arm and a leg either. I want to be fair, and I want to get what I also think that I'm worth.
Yeah, I think that's what it really ultimately boils down to, is you don't want to charge less than industry standard by a substantial amount, but you also don't want to charge too much, because then people might not hire you. You need to find the sweet spot, and you need to make sure that ultimately you're getting what you think you're worth. As long as you're getting what you think you're worth, that's like problem A solved, problem one. Problem two is making sure that you don't think you're worth nothing, so that everyone else is, like, all of a sudden screwed because this guy comes onto the scene that starts sniping gigs for free or for cheap. But yeah, we'll talk about all that offline. I'll make sure that you're in the right place. I know you have a potential offer sitting on your table right now, so I want to make sure we help you get that one ironed away, because now you need it more than ever given the current COVID situation and your work. So hopefully we can bring that one together.
Cool, man. No,
All right.
that sounds good. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining me on the show, Cory. I really do appreciate it. Guys, if you liked the show, you can go ahead and subscribe to us here on YouTube. You should also follow us on social media, Nerd Street Gamers, NERDST Gamers, just like we have here on Twitter, Facebook, all of those. You can catch us anywhere, Instagram as well. Also, make sure you head to Twitch and follow our page there. We are constantly broadcasting live events or online events in the current landscape. Gaming events, we recently did a Valorant event, and we will have more coming up as well, including an Apex Legends event featuring the likes of Emmanuel Sanders, wide receiver in the NFL, competing currently with the New Orleans Saints. Guys, make sure you check it out, and thanks for watching.